She almost didn't open it. The envelope sat on her kitchen counter for 3 days, cream-colored and deliberate. Her name written in a font someone had clearly chosen to impress. When she finally opened it, she stood at the counter in her work clothes and read it twice. Not from shock. From the specific kind of recognition that comes when someone confirms what you always suspected about them. Daniel was getting married, and he had invited her. She told herself she wouldn't go. Then she booked a blowout appointment for the Saturday morning of the wedding. And that told her everything she needed to know about her own intentions. The venue was the kind of place that required valet parking and pretended not to notice it. She handed over her keys and walked in alone, which was fine. She had been walking into rooms alone for 4 years now, ever since the apartment they shared became the apartment he kept, and she became, in his retelling of things, someone who had held him back. She'd heard the narrative secondhand through mutual friends who thought they were being neutral. That she had been too focused on work, too guarded, that he had outgrown the life they built together, which was a careful way of saying he had found someone with more money in her family name than in her actual account. The ballroom confirmed it. The flowers alone were a statement. The bride's family occupied the front rows with the ease of people accustomed to being in front rows. And Daniel moved through them with a new posture. Shoulders back, laugh slightly louder than necessary, the body language of a man performing belonging. She took a glass of champagne from a passing tray and found a position near the far window. Watching. She saw the bride before the bride saw her. That was when her hand stopped moving toward her mouth. She knew that face. Not well. Not intimately. But well enough that her brain required a full 3 seconds to reconcile the context. Caroline Marsh. Younger than her by maybe 6 years. Dark hair pinned up. A dress that was quietly extraordinary. She had met Caroline at a conference 4 maybe 5 years ago. Caroline had been newer then, nervous in the particular way of someone trying not to appear nervous. And she had ended up beside her during a panel lunch, and they had talked, genuinely talked, about a licensing dispute. Caroline was navigating with no one in her corner. She had given her the name of a lawyer she trusted, had followed up once by email, had thought nothing more of it. Apparently, Caroline had thought more of it. She watched Daniel touch the small of Caroline's back and felt nothing she hadn't already processed in the years since. What she felt instead was something harder to name, a kind of structural irony. That of all the women Daniel could have found on his way to the life he wanted, he had found one whose trajectory had briefly, quietly passed through hers. She was deciding whether to leave before the ceremony when Caroline saw her. There was a receiving line. There were people in it. Caroline left it. She walked directly across the room with the focused calm of someone who had made a decision and didn't need anyone's permission. And she said her name like a complete sentence. "I didn't know you'd be invited," Caroline said. There was no accusation in it, just information being processed. "I didn't know you were the bride," she replied, "until about 4 minutes ago." Something moved across Caroline's face, not guilt exactly, more like the recognition that the geometry of this situation was more complicated than she'd been handed. "He told me you two ended bad," she said. "He didn't tell me anything else about you." "That sounds right," she said, and meant it without bitterness. They stood for a moment in the particular silence of 2 women triangulated by the same man, both too intelligent to pretend otherwise. "The lawyer you sent me," Caroline said finally. "Hendricks. He saved that whole deal. I've worked with him on 3 things since. He's good. I never properly thanked you." "You didn't need to." She wasn't sure afterward exactly how it happened. The natural drift of a crowded room, the way introductions occur at weddings before anyone decides they want them. But she found herself, glass still in hand, being introduced to Caroline's father by Caroline herself. Richard Marsh, she knew the name. Most people in her industry did. He was the kind of figure who didn't need introduction in rooms where his name had already done the work. And his name had done considerable work in the past few years in exactly the sector she operated in. He knew her name, too, not from Daniel, not from any of this. He knew it from a partnership structure she had built 18 months after the divorce, when she had nothing but time and the particular clarity that arrives after a life gets stripped down. A quiet arrangement that had since grown into something visible enough that people like Richard Marsh noticed it. She watched him make the connection out loud. Her name, her company, the deal he had followed. And she did not look at Daniel. She didn't need to. She could feel him nearby, processing, recalculating. She could feel the room shifting almost imperceptibly around a social fact he hadn't anticipated and could not now take back. That the woman he had invited to witness his arrival had already arrived somewhere he hadn't reached yet. She said goodbye to Caroline quietly near the edge of the room before the ceremony began. "You should get back," she said. "It's your wedding." Caroline looked at her for a moment with an expression she couldn't quite categorize. Not apologetic, something more honest than that. "Take care of yourself," Caroline said. "You, too." She meant it. She collected her coat, nodded to the valet, and drove home through the early evening with the windows down and the radio on something she didn't really listen to. She didn't feel triumphant. She felt mostly tired in the way that follows relief. Like a door she hadn't realized she was still holding open had finally, without drama, clicked shut. She made tea when she got home. She sat with it at the kitchen table in the quiet. That was all.